Well, morning guys, and in this episode of Jack the Ripper I'm going to be looking at 3 of the canonical victims. That's Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman and Liz Stride. I'm going to give the other 2 their own video, I think, or their own videos, because it starts to get very sort of like complicated. So what happened? First, before I go anywhere else, I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Geospatial, the Skywatcher, because he did me a sort of like a tribute Jack the Ripper song, but it didn't go down too well, I don't think. So I'm sorry about that, Geo. Touchy subject, but at the same time I'd like to sort of like emphasize that I'm not into Satanism or anything like that. I always just found this an incredible, fascinating detective story, and I always had some strange connection to it. So yeah, let's carry on. So I've got, as I said before, lots of Ripper books, and there's huge amounts of information about this, but I'm just going to stick to the jacktheripper.org casebook, because they've got all the information there is to get, and they've condensed it, and it's as good a place as any to go to. Also, what I did, I made a map of my own here. I had to actually make a mini film, upload it, so that you could see the cursor. So our first lady, let's have a look, is she was found here, I believe. Yeah, hang on, it says 3 there. That's number 3 there. Okay, so Mary Ann Nichols. Right, so Mary Ann Nichols, she was also known as Polly Nichols. She was only 5 foot 2 inches tall, brown eyes, dark complexion, and then we got like a bit of a history about her. She was married, she had 5 children, and things started to go a little bit bad for her. She separated from her husband in 1881, so 7 years before she got murdered, and became a prostitute, although she was living with other men. Now, after she left her husband, I mean, he had an affair apparently with the nurse who was looking after Polly after she'd had her final child, but she couldn't deal with it, left home, became a prostitute, and then there's this horrible sort of history of her being in and out of workhouses. And then she gets a job working in a family. She writes a letter to her dad saying, I'm settled in a nice place, all's going all right, nearly nice people, blah blah blah, answer soon. And then she leaves the job out for 2 months, steals a load of stuff, leaves, and then moves up north of the river. Now, she was south of the river before. Lambeth is all south of the river. So I think to get away from the police, she moved north. And her first address is in Thrall Street, Spitalfields. Now we're going to go back to my map now, because this is Thrall Street in here. Now all these streets are all in the same area, you know? Everything is in the same place. Yeah, so we got Commercial Street, Wentworth, and there's Thrall Street. Now Flower and Dean Street, this one here, yeah, is where all the lodging houses were. So Our Lady lived in here at that time. Thrall Street. Yeah, and then she's sort of like soliciting, trying to get money, and she meets a friend who was watching the Shadwell dry dock fire. She was very drunk and says she will return to Flower and Dean Street, where she could share bed with a man. So in Flower and Dean Street, here, there was a lodging house called the White House, where you can actually kip down with a bloke for the night. It wasn't just singletons, so I'm guessing the prostitutes took their clients there now and again, get off the streets. Anyway, it never happened. It never happened. So, hang on, I think I might have got the bloody map wrong already. Sorry for swearing. So, Bucks Row. No, I had it right. There she goes. So, she was found here. So, she'd wandered a bit. So, a carman found it. A usual list of her stuff. Now, she'd had her throat cut as the others, and she was sort of cut up quite badly in the lower part of the abdomen. Really sort of violently sort of messed about with. Yeah. It was, I think this one was on a Friday. Yeah. So she was murdered on a Friday night. Well, early Saturday morning. Probably between about 2:30 and 3 a.m. Witching hours, man. Yeah. So this poor lady ended up there. So that's our first one. Right, our second lady. This is Annie Chapman. So this was just a week or so later, just about a week later. So Annie is right up in our area. She's up here. And yet again, when you sort of look at Annie's addresses and where she lived, the same sort of thing. So she was married as well. And here's a photograph of her in better times. Her husband was a coachman. They had 3 children, and they separated because of her drunken and immoral ways, and she was arrested several times in Windsor for drunkenness. She lost a couple of her children. One was born disabled and was sent to a home, and another one died of meningitis at the age of 12, and I don't think she really got over it, and her husband died, and she was just the usual sort of story. So in 1886 she was living with a sieve maker in Dorset Street. Yeah. Dorset Street is here. Yeah. Miller's Court is here. That's where the last victim gets killed. But yeah, Dorset Street is across here in our area. And on the day of her murder, so where was she living? Right, let's have a look. She was living in Dorset Street then? Yeah, so she was living at Crossingham's lodging house at Dorset Street when she got killed. So she was in a fight. She was having like some fight with some woman over a man or over somebody pinching some money. And she also wasn't very well. She had she said she wasn't feeling very well for quite a few days, and that week she's sort of like talking about going hop picking. That's relevant, that comes up later. She's got bruises on her face and on her chest, but she was a drunk and a lot of fighting was going on, Anyway, she wanders off. 1:35 in the morning, she's in the lodging house, and they won't let her go in because she hasn't got her money. And she's saying that she has had her money 3 or 4 times that night and spent it already, but I'm going to go off and get some more. And that was it. Found dead. This one, she had a lot of stuff on her, and he went a little bit more to town with her. Yeah. The left, I'm sorry that this is unpleasant, but that's exactly what it was. It's unpleasant, man. So she had her throat slashed again, yeah? Or they all had their throats slashed from left to right. Right, so her abdomen had been completely opened up and her intestines had been lifted out and placed on her shoulder. Her womb was taken out. Yeah, it was just, evisceration. So the surgeon at the time said that he couldn't have done it. He couldn't have done it. If he had done it, it would have taken him the best part of an hour. And he assumes that somebody with knowledge of anatomy had to do it. And this, of course, caused all sorts of theories about butchers and slaughtermen and things like that. And there was already, I think it was with this one, a rumour went around about some guy called Jack Pizer, Pizer, called Leather Apron, who'd been harassing the prostitutes, and for a while everybody thought it was this guy, Jack Pizer, or Peasy. It was always very difficult for them to find anybody to give any historical fact about them, because they've been living in workhouses and with different men and on the streets for so long, you know. Our last victim, let's go back, let's find her. I don't want this to be too long or too gory, but there are certain identifiers. This is Liz Stride. She's a Swedish lady. So back to my map. Was found down here. Now, there was a hospital here, the London Hospital, which I'm going to look at later because that's really relevant, because quite a lot of these people were always at the hospital for this and that, bits and pieces, and it wasn't far. Venereal diseases, coughs, colds, a lot of them were pretty ill, you know, and I think they used to hang out up there as well. But yeah, so Liz was here. So we have 1, 2, 3. Now, Liz Stride is part of what they called the double event, because he didn't finish the job and then shot off down here, pretty sharpish, to do Catherine Eddowes in the same evening. I think there was half an hour he had to get from there to there and do the work. But this one I will talk about, Catherine Eddowes, I'll talk about her next time. So yeah, Liz. So here's our lady. So she was born Elizabeth Gutast daughter on a farm in Gothenburg, Sweden. And she was registered as a prostitute in Sweden before she left. And then she moved to England, and she told this crazy story about being on the Princess Alice, and she said that her husband and children were killed and that her palate was injured because she was kicked in the mouth while climbing the mast to escape. But there was never any evidence to back this up, and it was thought that she just made it up to get money from the Swedish church, you know. Anyway, in 1885 she's living with a guy called Michael Kidney, and they lived together for 3 years. But she often clears off and goes off on the town, man. So it's stormy, drunken relationship. And she's on the game. She's on the game. She's a prostitute. And she's probably got a pimp. So she's at the Poplar Warehouse. and all these different... Then suddenly she turns up in Flower and Dean Street. Yeah. She's in Flower and Dean Street, 32. So she's in the Jack the Ripper area. This guy was either getting his victims for somebody else from here. Yeah. So here's our Flower and Dean Street, the lodging house. Lodging houses down there. I'll do a video about the lodging houses because they're really quite interesting in their own right. I'm going to do some sort of like complimentary videos with this now that I'm back on it. And I find this a bit strange as well. Dr. Bernardo. Now, Dr. Thomas Bernardo is a doctor who had taken to street preaching, and then he opened a famous home for destitute boys. Now, it's a children's home. Oh, sorry about that. The door went. Right, okay, so Dr. Bernardo opened up this home he opened up loads of children's homes. But he actually went to the lodging house at 32 Flower and Dean Street that she was in, and went into her room, and there were a bunch of prostitutes in there, and he was looking for children to put into his home. And on entering the kitchen at 32 Flower and Dean Street, he found the women and girls there thoroughly frightened. They were discussing the murders. One woman, probably drunk, cried bitterly, "We're all up to no good. No one cares what becomes of us. Perhaps some of us will be killed next." And on viewing the body, Dr. Bernardo recognises Liz instantly as one of the women in the kitchen. Yeah? Well, not surprisingly, he ended up as one of the suspects. Okay, right. So, on the night of her death, she's wandering around looking for clients, and she's seen with quite a lot of different men. Men here, men there, hugging and kissing one bloke. They were quite surprised at how he was all over her. And then somebody sees her with a couple of guys, one pushing her to the ground, and a bit later on, she's found with her throat cut. That's all she had. She had her throat cut, and it is believed that this guy, Dean Schutz, frightened the Ripper off, caused him to flee, and he shot off down the street. And there she is, Liz. Yeah. So she had her throat cut, and that was it. Now, I don't understand why she's been made a canonical victim, because I will go back to her, but I have a feeling that this was more like somebody who might have or messed up her pimp thing, you know, and it was like a killing to get her off the streets in the style of Jack the Ripper without all the other stuff. But according to them, he kills her here and then trots off down here in time to get our poor Catherine Eddowes. But I don't know, I've got a feeling about this one. I've got a feeling this one was planned quite meticulously to get shot of, but I'll come back to that. Anyway, there we go. There's our first 3 victims. Annie, Polly, Annie and Liz. And that's about really all I got to say about this. But as I said before, they are all connected to Flower and Dean Street, Fashion Street, Thrall Street and Dorset Street. In here where all the lodging houses were. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I'm sorry it's a bit bitty, but I just wanted to get up to speed because I've been so distracted with my painting. Anyway, thanks a lot.